Welcome to Oklahoma Gardening. On today's episode, host Casey Hentges harvests kale and spinach from the Keyhole Garden. We finish up some details and plant our new Ornamental Crops Garden. Casey visits the heirloom vegetable area in the Linnaeus Teaching Garden in Tulsa. Barbara Brown prepares a sweet and spicy pepper salad, and we visit with historical botanist John Bartram. Oklahoma Gardening is a production of the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the land grant mission of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University, dedicated to improving the quality of life of the citizens of Oklahoma through research-based information. Underwriting assistance is provided by TLC, Oklahoma's leading garden center, Southwood Landscape and Nursery, Tulsa's source for great gardens, and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, helping to keep Oklahoma green and growing.
We are here in our Keyhole Garden where we've planted some cool season crops that are starting to really grow and need to be harvested. We've got a couple of different kinds of kale. One, we've got this dwarf Siberian kale. And when you're harvesting your cool season crops, you want to make sure that you're harvesting early in the morning or late in the evening when they're most turgid. And that means that they've got a lot of moisture still in the leaf. So what we're going to do is remove these towards the base, and you want to take the older leaves first. When they're about the size of your hand is really an ideal time. If they get too much larger, then they're going to have more of a bitter taste. So we're just going to simply remove some of these outside leaves, and we're going to leave the smaller interior leaves so that it will continue to produce for us and we continue to get more harvest from them. The tattered leaves that are down in the soil, you're going to want to just harvest those and throw those into your compost pile in the center of the Keyhole Garden. Also, as the plant gets older and the temperatures increase, the leaves are going to have a bitter taste, so include those into the center pile. We also have a Nero de Toscano kale here, and the leaf looks a little bit different on it. But again, you do the same thing. You remove the outside leaves first and allow that interior growth to remain so that you continue to harvest from it. We also have some red stem spinach here, and what we're going to do is simply just take off some of those leaves. And you can either harvest this once, or you can sometimes get multiple harvests from it. Some of the smaller leaves will remain behind, and again, they'll continue to push up and you'll get some new leaves coming up to harvest again. So this is what we're going to do, and we're going to continue to harvest our kale so that we have a nice salad. Like so many farmers that are beginning to get out in the fields, we decided it was time to start planting our ornamental crops garden. And there was a couple of things that we did in order to establish this theme of the garden before we planted. We've got some gabion baskets, which are kind of reminiscent of the farmer that used to harvest the rocks out of their field to protect their tractors. A lot of times they would collect those rocks and use them as a corner post for their fences. Nowadays, a lot of times gabion baskets are used in an ornamental way in their landscape as an accent or a featured hardscape material. Here we've used it just to feature the center, the axis of our garden. We also have some cultivators that we've used as ornaments to highlight our trellis where our hops will be growing. And then finally, we had an old tin whistle or culvert that we've actually cut up into several segments, and we're going to use these as planters. We're going to put some black sweet potato vine on the ground and have some chartreuse sweet potato vine coming up out of these. So a couple of things to do in order to prepare these. We don't want to fill this whole thing with potting soil. First, we need to stabilize this so that they don't tip over. as we add weight into them. And we're going to use rebarb here and simply stick those around the outside. And then we're going to need to hammer those in. Once we have that stabilized, we're going to then use some pots to fill the space so we don't have to fill it with potting soil so much. You can also use pop bottles or milk jugs. And basically those are going to rest right in between that rebarb and fill a good portion of that so that you don't have to fill it completely with potting soil. Next, we're going to add sand around those pots to allow for better drainage. So after we have filled it with sand, the next step is to add potting soil, and we still have about 12 inches of root zone space that will be filled with potting soil. Whenever we're putting together a new container, we like to top dress it with some slow release fertilizer, and then as we plant, we will incorporate this into the soil. After cutting this culvert, we noticed that it had some rather sharp edges, and so to protect us and the gardeners and also our visitors, we wanted to make sure to cover that edging. And we've purchased a rubber trim that is actually made to cover metal edges, but if you don't have this, you can also use an old garden hose that you split down the middle, and you're simply going to feed this over that edge. Now, you want to start in the back and work your way around, so as people are viewing the garden from the front, they don't see any seams in that trim. I know a lot of farmers are excited about the recent rains, and as gardeners we are too. It did, however, delay the planting of this garden, and so you can see some of our plants are a little bit stretched and a little bit chlorotic because they stayed in pots just a bit too long in the greenhouse. However, now that we've got them in the garden, they're going to be just fine with a little bit of fertilizer. The other thing that we did is we started some plants in the greenhouse because okra and corn need a 60-degree soil temperature in order to germinate. We've spaced these plants a little bit further apart because we're going to actually interplant some seeds so we have some succession planting going on. The idea behind our ornamental crop garden is to display agriculture crops that are now being utilized in a more ornamental way, such as black cotton, purple millet, and sunflowers. The last thing that we did was we added some cottonseed hull mulch, again keeping with the whole agriculture theme, and this will be a nice protector from weeds, and we may have a few stray cotton plants that sprout up next to our black cotton.
Today we're doing sweet and spicy pepper salad, and this is a variety of peppers, and it does take a little bit of time to get going, but trust me, it's going to be worth it, and it's something you can definitely do ahead. In fact, I encourage you to do it about 4 hours before you're ready to serve it. So if you've got family coming in, you've got time to still be with the crowd. So we're going to start with the dressing, and I'm going to use the juice from one orange, or if you don't have an orange to juice, but you have orange juice in the refrigerator, it's going to be about half a cup. If you juice it yourself, I encourage you to go ahead and put the pulp in here too. It's in the blender. If you don't like pulp, it's pretty much going to disappear anyhow. And then I've got 2 cloves of garlic that have been minced up. Put those in there. And then a tablespoon of vegetable oil. And you can use whatever kind you've got handy or whichever kind you like. Probably not something that's excessively flavorful, but there's a lot of flavor going on here, so it's probably going to mask anything that would be a stronger one anyway. So this is going to get blended until, or pureed until it's really smooth. Okay, once you get that well blended, well purified to your desire, you probably don't want to have big chunks of garlic in there, but once it's pureed well, set it aside. We're going to get it again in just a minute. All right, get out a nice big bowl, or at least for me it's a big bowl for stirring purposes. And to the bowl I'm going to add 1 jalapeno that I have chopped up fairly finely. Now I seeded it and took the membranes out. I do wear gloves when I work with jalapeno, just because I seem to have hands that burn more than some other people do, apparently. And if you wanted a stronger pepper in this, you could definitely go with something stronger. If you don't like the heat at all, you could cut back on the amount of jalapeno that you added. I'm also going to add to this 1 mango that's been cut up, seeded and large dice. And then I've got 3 additional peppers. So as I said, this has a lot of pepper in it. There are 4, and they're all different colors, which add so much interest to the dish that people are going to want to try it that maybe don't usually like peppers. So 1 large red bell pepper, seeded and sliced the long way. The same with a green bell pepper, and the same with a yellow. Now, if you only had 1 color of pepper, say all you had was orange. Well, working for OSU, I'm not going to object to that, but this adds a lot more drama when you get the different colors going in there, pulls in a lot more interest, and if you had only had red, you could do that too. Now I'm going to use an apple. This is only half an apple, and I've taken the core out of it and again just sliced it the long way. You could slice this in half again if you wanted to, so that they'd be more bite-sized, but the peppers are already so long that people are going to be dealing with that issue when it gets to eating it, so I wouldn't worry about that quite as much. And then I have about 1/3 of a cup of fairly finely chopped cilantro, about 1/4 of a teaspoon of black pepper, and 1/2 teaspoon of kosher salt, and put that in. And if you wanted to, if you're concerned about the salt content, or you just want to make sure that it's not too salty or whatnot, you can go ahead and mix it together and then come back and taste it and see if you need more. You can't ever take it out, that's why that's a good plan. All right, dressing is going over it, and then it's simply a matter of tossing it together so that everything gets coated. Now we do this, in part becomes a marinated salad because it's going to taste better if you can let it sit for about 4 hours. Now keep in mind that when you're marinating things that have a lot of green color in them, chlorophyll in particular, since that's the green color, if you leave it too long in acid, which the orange juice is, it's going to start to turn sort of that olive drab army color, which is great on a soldier but not so good in a salad. So seal this tightly, put it in the refrigerator. You could put it in a smaller container and seal it well. Let it sit for about 4 hours, and then when you're done, you get this terrific salad with so much color, so much flavor, that I think it's going to be a real delight to your family and those you share it with. I hope you'll give it a try. It's sweet and spicy pepper salad. For Oklahoma Gardening, I'm Barbara Brown.
We're here at the Linnaeus Garden, and joining me today is Barry Fugit. Thank you for joining us.
Oh,
and
joy to have you here.
This is a beautiful garden. It's a little jewel right here in Tulsa, and I'm excited to be here with you. And we're in the vegetable garden. Can you tell us a little bit about the vegetable garden?
Well, this was almost a part of the garden that we didn't build. We thought, well, it's in a metropolitan area. We're going to do about 7 different areas of this garden. And someone said, why are you building a veggie garden in an urban area? This has been really one of the most popular segments of the Linnaeus Teaching Garden. So, yeah, it's a little small sunken garden with raised beds in it. Very simple things, but there's a whole generation of people out there that's not done this before, and this is a way to teach them.
Right, and food's becoming so popular with gardening and where your food's coming from, and I think you've done it in a really elegant way here. A lot of times the vegetable garden tends to be a little bit more utilitarian, but you've
like
got,
mine at home.
right. But you've got beautiful raised beds here, and then you've got the cattle panels that you use as a trellis here.
Linnaeus is as much an ideas garden as it is anything else, and so we want people to come and see things and go, I could do that at home, in the raised bed and the cattle panels that you have mentioned. They're galvanized, they last forever, they're very inexpensive. You can make tomato cages out of them, you can do them flat on the wall, you can do arches with them. There's just so many uses in a garden for cattle panels.
Right, and you were saying you actually are growing some cantaloupe or watermelon up on one of those.
Now
and
that exactly.
You hammock them.
We do. We take bird netting, and we take a 24-inch area of it and some S screws and hook it into that bird netting, put it up underneath those melons so it'll support the melons, and we'll grow tomatoes watermelons on a wall.
So you don't
or
need
melons, or maybe they're half tomatoes, I don't know.
So you don't need a lot of space actually to grow these vining fruits.
That's right, and Linnaeus wants to exemplify that. You know, in an urban area where lots are shrinking and garden sizes are basically, how do you get the most out of a small area? And that's basically what we're doing here at Linnaeus.
That's intense gardening right there.
That's it.
So can you tell me about these espaliers that you have growing on the wall
I
here?
love doing espaliers, and you know, many gardeners think this is so complicated and difficult to do, and it's really very, very easy to do. Just pruning plants in such a way that they conform to a flat plane, however you want to do it. But that's pears, that's an oriental pear or an Asian pear. And the reason I like to use them here is there's no spraying, I can produce fruit on them. If the squirrels would leave them alone, I'd produce a lot of fruit on them. But just very easy to do, and just maybe monthly, every 6 weeks, a little trimming on them to make them conform to the plane. And it's about as simple as that.
And I would assume that would take more pruning at certain times when they're actively growing.
Well, I'm embarrassed to say that had you been here last week, you couldn't see the fence for all the overgrowth, and I just hadn't got out here, and so it got a very major haircut last week. But we're just kind of in the Nithin system on a wall, and but it works very well for us.
Well, it looks beautiful, and you're adding to the Linnaeus garden. You're going to be planting a butterfly garden soon.
So excited about that. A donor stepped up, and we're going to be putting in an entire border of nectar plants and butterfly attracting plants, lots of boulders and a walk, and it's just, Linnaeus is just, we're just constantly adding little venues to this garden that hopefully the public will like and want to mimic it.
Right, it's beautiful, and you guys have been here for 10 years. This is your 10th anniversary,
10
correct?
years in June. It's been like a heartbeat, but yeah, coming up in June.
So you're going to have a big anniversary celebration?
We are, and let me put that out there, that we're going to be giving away 500 hydrangeas, 1-gallon hydrangeas of a new variety that repeat blooms all summer long and into the fall. So be one of the first 500 people to come into the garden in that first Saturday in June, and we'll give you a free hydrangea.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
A great garden and free plants.
Can't beat that.
Thank you so much for joining us,
Casey,
Barry.
it's been a joy.
Thank you. We have a first here on Oklahoma Garden. I'm excited to bring to you a historical horticulture figure, John Bartram, joining us today on Oklahoma Gardening. Welcome to Oklahoma.
I know, it's just a magnificent state to be a part of.
Yes, you're a famous plant explorer. Can you tell us a little bit about the explorations you've done, and did it ever bring you to this part of the world?
No, but my son came very close in a subsequent year when he was south, going through Texas and Louisiana and the southern states. But for me, it's the trade with all of the native population. You know, I wouldn't be half the botanist that I am were it not for all of the plants that the natives introduced me to. You know, we were both recognized as being interested in the native medicinal herbs. That's how it all started. Europe craved cures for the common syphilis or cold, and they sent out great exploration parties looking for ginseng because China was charging them weight in silver for it. So if we could find it here, it would be cheaper for them, especially England, because it ruled the waves, and North America to England was a short trip versus any of the longer routes to the Orient.
And you started collecting these plants and then sending them to England?
Yes.
In Bartram's boxes, is that what they became known as?
Bartram's boxes, yes. For 5 guineas, you too could have a guarantee of 100 different species with as many as 1,000 plants in a box. And the average one was 18 inches by 12 by 15. And the size was so perfect that it would fit exactly under the pillow of the captain's cabin's bed, because that's the driest cubic inches on any North Atlantic merchantman.
So with all your Bartram's boxes that you were sending over to England, you kind of acquired a special status with the king. Can you tell us about that?
Well, not only with the king, but with the top dukes, barons, earls, lords, and ladies, too. It was an aristocratic trade in the botany of empire. And with the current fashion of doing an English country-style landscape, where they're great, gorgeous green lawns with the sheep's meadows out in front of those majestic palaces, with the great lakes that would reflect the house to make it look twice as large as it actually was. We're surrounded by those ornamental decorative copse of trees. That's where I came in.
Okay.
We were providing them with a session and a selection of species of trees, the like of which they had never seen in nature before. So Capability Brown, the great landscape designer, and Alexander Pope were describing landscapes defining the trade of the North Atlantic horticulture from Bartram's garden.
And there was one plant you put in every box. What was that plant?
It was the lady's slipper orchid.
Why that plant?
Well, that plant was a challenge. You know how gardeners always like to have the latest and the greatest and the best and the newest. And if I could put a root of that plant into every box, it was a challenge to English gardeners to see if they could bring it to flower. And it took them years. They had to develop a whole industry of glass houses, heated interior spaces, framed in iron and sided with sheets, huge, enormous sheets of paneled glass. Franklin got a royalty on his stoves. I got nothing. Nothing. But ultimately, yes, they cultured the lady slipper orchid, and the Cypripedium went into the books as a historic first for Peter Collins and his friends.
You mentioned Benjamin Franklin.
Yes.
You had him as a friend and a few other of our founding fathers. Can you tell us what it was like to live with them?
Benjamin Franklin was difficult to live with. That's why he spent most of his life overseas. And the same way with Adams, an obstinate, ornery little man. And yet you had the rest of them, all of them, agriculturists, deeply embedded in the soil and the wealth and diversity of the biology that they were presented in this great North American garden that we had, this East of Eden. I came into my trade through introduction by James Logan, who was the secretary to Pennsylvania's great Quaker colony. He came in the first migration of Quakers with William Penn and took on all of the weight of his royalty in this colony. And he had a great library that allowed me to read and study and notice and understand that there was a great art involved too through botanical illustration.
So you were a self-taught man.
Had to be.
And you were
no
originally a farmer. You started out being a farmer. Where's home?
Home is on the banks of the Schuylkill River, next to Philadelphia, as a Quaker farmer, third generation, born in 1699.
You look good for your age.
I know, it has all to do with the tannins out of the trees that you get. It's good to cure leather that way.
Now your home has turned into the first botanical garden
and wholesale retail
in
nursery.
Oklahoma, and wholesale retail nursery.
Yes.
In fact,
Yes.
Nowadays we get a lot of plant catalogs and we don't think anything other than we're excited to get them as gardeners, but you really started that.
Well, there was a list. Benjamin Franklin said, here, I have a secret. If you put things on paper and you print them and you distribute them for general consumption, people will fight a path to your door. So he suggested that I print a catalog of my 100 best-selling plants, newest introductions, latest to the trade, all of the excitement of spring. And if you were are you a member of the Aristocratic Society of Britain?
No, I'm not. Sorry.
Are you a designated heir or a sign of any lord or lady in England? Well, then you wouldn't have gotten one. I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry.
We could make you a special list.
I would appreciate that.
But they were sent to all of the great estate houses in England.
So you marketed, direct marketing.
It was a very direct marketing campaign. Philip Miller, who was director of the Physic Garden at Kew, through all of the Quaker connections of Dr. James Fothergill and Peter Collinson, and of course the Secretary General of Pennsylvania, James Logan. It was an open Rolodeck of names and addresses. And then ultimately, it was a much sought-after assignment to get a Bartram's box. If you happen to have employed Capability Brown as a landscape designer, Capability was on it He said, we've got to see what's the new introduction this year from a Bartram's box. We've got to get a copy of that list.
Do you think there's something you can take back from Oklahoma that England like here?
Yes.
What's that?
These very deep Cercis reniformis. You know, we don't have the color or the sense or the floriferousness of that tree. That is so lovely. And this Mexican plum.
Yes.
Prunus mexicana. It's just, they glow. In the evening, you can pass them and you can see them. They are outlined against these endless skies of yours. It's just magic.
Well, we're so happy to have you here in Oklahoma.
I'm happy to be had.
It's been a pleasure meeting you and talking to you, and we hope to hear more about your plant explorations in the future.
I look forward to giving them and to keeping the travels going.
Next week on Oklahoma Gardening, we visit with Oklahoma Secretary of Agriculture Jim Reese about a unique garden that they have in front of the Department of Agriculture building. Then Micah Anderson shows us some of the tools and techniques that they utilize in that garden. Back home, Casey looks at some beautiful plants that are in bloom, and we'll have timely information for your lawn. So join us then for more TV You'll Grow to Love. To find out more information about show topics, as well as recipes, videos, articles, fact sheets, and other resources, including a directory of local extension offices, be sure and visit our website, oklahomagardening.okstate.edu. And we always have great information, answers to questions, photos, and gardening discussions on your favorite social media as well. Join in on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find this entire show and other recent shows, as well as individual segments on our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. And tune in to our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel to watch segments from previous hosts. Oklahoma Gardening is produced by the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University. The Botanic Garden at OSU is home to our studio gardens, and we encourage you to come visit this beautiful Stillwater jewel. We wish to thank our generous underwriters, TLC Garden Centers, Southwood Landscape and Garden Center, and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry. Additional support is provided by Pond Pro Shops, Greenleaf Nursery and the Garden Debut Plants, and the Oklahoma Horticultural Society.